What if I told you that for thousands of years, humanity stared at the night sky, praying, dreaming, and wondering, but never knowing what the stars were made of? What if I told you that the greatest cosmic mystery of all time wasn't solved by a famous astronomer, or a decorated scientist, or a celebrated scholar, but by a young woman the world refused to listen to? Tonight, we step into a story where brilliance is ignored, truth is denied, and the universe itself waits for someone brave enough to understand it. This is the forgotten journey of Cecilia Payne, the woman who discovered the composition of the stars and was told she was wrong. Before we begin unraveling this cosmic injustice, hit that subscribe button, because here on Pioneers in the Dark, we resurrect the forgotten minds who changed our universe in ways the world never acknowledged. The story begins not with telescopes, observatories, or laboratories, but with a child, a quiet, intensely curious girl born in 1900 in Windover, England. Cecilia Helena Payne grew up in a world where girls were expected to be polite, obedient, and invisible. She was supposed to follow the script laid out for her, learn manners, play music, perhaps become a governess one day. But Cecilia's mind was never built for smallness. She felt pulled, not by society, not by tradition, but by something bigger, something celestial. While other girls memorized etiquette, Cecilia memorized the patterns of nature. She heard music and mathematics, poetry and physics, and when she looked at the stars, she didn't see distant dots of light. She saw questions. Questions that demanded answers. Tragedy struck early. Her father, Edward, died when she was just 4 years old, plunging the household into financial and emotional instability. Her mother struggled, raising Cecilia and her siblings alone. Loss etched itself into Cecilia's life like an invisible scar, shaping her into someone who knew that nothing, no comfort, no support, no security, was guaranteed. Perhaps that is why she developed an appetite for certainty, the kind of certainty only science could provide. The universe may have been vast and mysterious, but to Cecilia, it was honest. It may have been intimidating, but it wasn't cruel. The universe didn't care about gender, class, or expectations. It had answers, and she wanted to find them. Even in school, Cecilia stood apart. She wasn't rebellious. She was simply unstoppable. When her classmates memorized poems, she solved equations. When they learned sewing, she studied electricity. She discovered physics by accident, through a visiting lecturer whose passion ignited something inside her. She later said that the moment she heard a physicist explain the workings of the natural world, she knew with absolute certainty that her life had changed. Here was a religion, she wrote. Here was something I could believe in. But passion alone wasn't enough. England at the turn of the century was no place for a girl who wanted to become a scientist. Girls were discouraged, dismissed, and in many cases explicitly prohibited from entering scientific fields. The message was simple. Science was a man's world, but Cecilia Payne was built differently. She refused to shrink. At age 18, she won a scholarship to study at Cambridge University, an achievement nearly impossible for women at the time. But even Cambridge, with all its prestige, did not grant women degrees. Women could study, but they could not be recognized. They could labor, but they could not be acknowledged. Still, Cecilia saw it as a door, cracked open, but open nonetheless, and she stepped through it. Cambridge changed her life. For the first time, she was surrounded by scientific minds, by mathematics, by physics, by people who asked questions as feverishly as she did. But even there, she was a ghost in the system, brilliant but ignored, present but invisible. Allowed in the building but not in the records. Many professors refused to teach women. Some actively discouraged them, yet Cecilia thrived. She absorbed everything like a sponge, reading, studying, and conducting experiments long after others had gone home. Then something happened, a moment so small and yet so defining that it changed the direction of her destiny. One night, during a lecture on astrophysics, Cecilia felt something click inside her. It was as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing an entire universe she had never noticed. Stars weren't just beautiful, they were puzzles. They weren't just lights, they were messages. And their messages were written in the language of light. The idea struck her with the force of revelation, spectroscopy, the study of light and everything hidden inside it. With a prism and a telescope, you could break down starlight into patterns, and those patterns could tell you what the star was made of. Suddenly, she realized that the universe had fingerprints, and she wanted to read them. But Cambridge could not give her what she needed. Women were not allowed research positions. She could not pursue a career in physics. There was no future for her in England. And so, she made a decision almost unthinkable for a young woman in the early 1900s. She crossed the world. She sailed to the United States, to Harvard College Observatory, where a man named Harlow Shapley was building something revolutionary. The observatory was one of the few places on Earth where a woman could do serious research. It was home to the Harvard Computers, a group of women who had cataloged hundreds of thousands of stars. Silently, meticulously, without ever receiving proper recognition, Cecilia joined them, not as a computer, but as a scientist. And this was the moment her genius met its purpose. At Harvard, she discovered a freedom she had never known. Rows of glass photographic plates, each containing the captured light of distant stars, waited for someone to decode them. Cecilia dove in. The patterns of lines, the faint imprints of spectral signatures, these were her scriptures. She lived inside the data, studying the spectrum of each star with a devotion that bordered on obsession. She wasn't just analyzing numbers. She was listening to the voices of the cosmos, and the cosmos finally began to whisper back. Then came the breakthrough, the realization so earth-shattering that it would ultimately redefine our understanding of the universe. When Cecilia examined the spectra of stars, she noticed something strange. Elements like calcium and iron produced strong lines, stronger than she expected, but when she calculated their true abundance, she found they were incredibly rare. It didn't make sense. If stars were made of Earth-like materials, as all astronomers believed, then their spectral signatures should match their abundance. But they didn't. And then the truth emerged. Slow, reluctant, stunning. Cecilia realized that the strong spectral lines weren't the result of abundance. They were the result of temperature. The hotter the star, the more certain atoms absorbed light. This meant the entire foundation of stellar chemistry was wrong. Stars weren't made mostly of heavy elements. Stars were oceans of something far more fundamental: hydrogen and helium, the very building blocks of the universe. Hydrogen, the simplest, most common atom, was not a minor component. It was the dominant one. She calculated that the sun contained 1,000,000 times more hydrogen than heavy elements. And for the first time in human history, Cecilia Payne understood what stars were truly made of. Hydrogen, helium, the primordial elements born from the Big Bang. In that moment, she solved a mystery older than civilization itself. But history is rarely kind to brilliance. When she presented her findings, she was met not with applause, but with rejection. Even before the scientific world reacted, there was one more step she had to take: writing her PhD thesis. It would become legendary, the most brilliant dissertation in the history of astronomy. But she wrote it in the quiet isolation of a woman who knew that the world might not be ready for the truth. She titled it Stellar Atmospheres. In it, she laid out her discovery logically, mathematically, uncompromisingly. She had no doubt in her calculations. The universe was hydrogen, through and through. But as soon as her thesis reached the established astronomers, those who held power, titles, and influence, everything collapsed. Henry Norris Russell, one of the most respected astronomers in the world, dismissed her conclusion immediately. He said her results were clearly impossible. Others said she misinterpreted the data or misunderstood the physics, or simply failed to grasp what any senior astronomer would know. And because she was young, and because she was a woman, and because she had dared to overturn the foundation of astrophysics, she was told she was wrong. She was ordered to rewrite her thesis. Not the math, not the results, just one sentence. A sentence that would haunt her for years. She wrote that her conclusion, the one she knew was correct, was almost certainly not real. She was forced to deny her own discovery. Her truth had found the universe, but the world had refused to find her. Cecilia Payne had uncovered the secret of the stars, but the world wasn't ready to let her keep it. When she submitted her dissertation, she expected resistance, just not the full weight of the scientific establishment. Her calculations were flawless, her logic solid, her conclusion revolutionary. Stars are made mostly of hydrogen. But the old guard feared revolution, especially one coming from a young foreign woman in her 20s. Norris Russell, one of the most powerful astronomers in America, read her thesis and declared her results impossible, not because they were wrong, but because they were too bold. The accepted belief was that the Sun and Earth had similar compositions. Cecilia's discovery shattered that idea and threatened the careers built upon it. So the criticism began gently, with polite dismissals masking a clear message: you cannot be right to survive. She did what many women in science were forced to do. She stayed quiet. She revised her thesis with a humiliating disclaimer that her own results were almost certainly not real. It was an apology for telling the truth. She buried her discovery to protect her future. Still, the rejection cut deep. Alone at night in the observatory, she stared at the glass plates that once felt like windows to the universe. Now they felt like locked doors. She knew the stars spoke clearly, yet the world forced her to whisper. Inside Harvard Observatory, men published papers, taught classes, and received grants, while Cecilia worked in the background, uncredited and underpaid. She knew more about stellar atmospheres than anyone alive, yet she held no official title. Privately, her colleagues respected her. Publicly, they never acknowledged her. And so she poured herself into her work, letting science become her refuge. She studied spectra late into the night, her fingers numb from cold, her eyes strained from endless calculations. She worked harder than any of them, not for glory, but for truth. Years passed. Slowly, other astronomers began noticing flaws in the old models. When Norris Russell re-examined the data, he found what Cecilia had already found years earlier. In 1925, he finally confirmed that stars are mostly hydrogen. But when he published the discovery, he presented it as his own, giving Cecilia only a passing mention. Textbooks credited him. The world praised him. And her groundbreaking discovery faded into the background. Yet Cecilia kept going. She expanded her research into variable stars, stellar evolution, and galaxy chemistry, producing work that transformed astrophysics, often published under the names of male supervisors. She became the quiet engine of Harvard astronomy. Then she met Sergei Gaposchkin, a thoughtful astrophysicist who treated her as an equal. Their partnership grew into love. Together, they built a life of science, books, and 3 children. Even motherhood didn't slow her mind. She returned to research with her usual determination, but Harvard still denied her promotions. She taught classes under the names of male professors. She was indispensable, yet invisible, until 1956, when after years of advocacy, Harvard finally granted her a full professorship. Cecilia Payne became the first woman in Harvard's Faculty of Arts and Sciences to earn that title. And later, the first woman to chair a department. From a young girl discouraged from science to the woman who revealed the chemistry of the universe. Cecilia Payne changed astronomy forever. Even though the world rarely gave her credit, she never stopped searching the stars, because for her, the truth was reward enough. In the years that followed her groundbreaking doctoral thesis, Cecilia Payne walked a path that was both triumphant and lonely, a path lit by the glow of distant stars, yet shadowed by the stubbornness of the very people who claimed to study them. After being told by Henry Norris Russell that her conclusion, that the sun was made almost entirely of hydrogen, was impossible, she continued her research not with bitterness, but with an almost otherworldly patience, as if she trusted that the universe itself would one day defend her. And indeed, slowly, silently, without applause or acknowledgement, the evidence began to turn. The patterns of stellar spectra she continued to analyze showed consistency across star types, across temperatures, across lifetimes. Wherever she looked, hydrogen ruled the skies. But recognition did not come immediately, nor did it come eagerly. Her colleagues cited her work without using her name. Papers were written that leaned entirely on her data while pretending it came from elsewhere. And through it all, she kept going, not for validation, not for glory, but for the simple reason that the stars were calling, and she could not ignore them. By the early 1930s, Cecilia's influence had quietly spread through the astronomical world. Young physicists began referring to the hydrogen hypothesis, though rarely giving credit to the woman who had first dared to propose it. At Harvard, she continued teaching, though without the official title of professor. She mentored students who would later become giants in astrophysics, shaping the next generation with the same clarity and rigor that had defined her own work. Yet when students addressed her as Professor Payne, administrators corrected them. She was, officially, just a technical assistant, earning a salary far below that of her male counterparts. Most would have been crushed by such disregard. But Cecilia, with her quiet resilience, carried her burden without complaint, trusting that knowledge, like light, could not be hidden forever. Her work expanded beyond stellar composition. She studied variable stars, novae, supergiants, the structure of the Milky Way. She cataloged stars with an obsessive precision that bordered on the monastic, filling thousands of pages with handwritten notes, calculations, and observations. She worked through illness, through cold New England winters, through the disruptions of World War II. When the world around her changed, she stayed rooted to her purpose, to understand the cosmos. Her silence was not weakness, it was discipline. It was the refusal to let noise distract from truth. And while others debated her work in lecture halls and conferences she was rarely invited to, she simply kept proving herself with more data, more analysis, more brilliance. By the mid-1930s, a remarkable shift occurred, one that seemed small then, but would echo for decades. Henry Norris Russell, the very man who had told her she must be wrong, published a paper confirming her results. He concluded that stars were indeed composed mostly of hydrogen and helium, and that the heavy elements scientists once believed dominated the universe were nothing more than trace materials. It was a reversal so profound that it reshaped astrophysics entirely. However, in his paper, Russell acknowledged the discovery with a single, understated line. The earlier work of Miss Payne should not be overlooked. It was not praise. It was not an apology. But it was the first crack in the wall of silence surrounding her achievement. The truth had become undeniable. Even so, official recognition lagged for decades. Cecilia Payne continued working as a researcher, living in a modest apartment near Harvard Observatory and battling illnesses brought on by years of stress and overwork. In 1933, she married Sergei Gaposchkin, a Russian-born astronomer who had fled European political turmoil. Together, they formed a scientific partnership unlike any other. They studied variable stars for decades, cataloging hundreds of thousands of observations, more than any other team in history. Their home became a sanctuary of charts, notebooks, and star maps, a temple of discovery where both worked tirelessly late into the night. Their marriage brought Cecilia a semblance of stability and companionship she had never known, though the recognition she deserved still remained distant. In the 1940s, she was asked to take on greater teaching responsibilities at Harvard, though still without the title or salary of a professor. Her lectures became legendary, not because she demanded attention, but because she made the universe feel intimate. Students later recalled her voice, quiet, thoughtful, but carrying a kind of gravity that forced you to listen. She spoke of stars not as distant objects, but as ancient, burning stories written in light. She taught them that science was not a competition, but a devotion, and that the universe rewarded humility more than arrogance. Many of these students would go on to reshape astrophysics, and nearly all of them would later say the same thing, that Cecilia Payne was the most brilliant mind they had ever met. But institutions, unlike stars, do not change quickly. For years, she fought for equal pay. For years, she was denied basic recognition. And for years, she watched her male colleagues ascend to positions of authority she had long since earned. Still, she never stopped working. She never stopped searching. Her notebooks multiplied. Her discoveries accumulated. Her legacy quietly grew. Then, in 1956, 31 years after completing the most brilliant doctoral thesis in the history of astronomy, Harvard finally did something unprecedented. They broke their own tradition, shattered their own barriers, and appointed Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin as the first woman to ever hold a full professorship in the university's Faculty of Arts and Sciences. It was a moment so historic that newspapers across the country printed her name. Students and academics celebrated, and women in science finally had a symbol of possibility. But for Cecilia, the moment was bittersweet. She had waited an entire lifetime for an acknowledgement that should have been immediate. Her hair had grayed, her hands trembled slightly when she wrote, and her once razor-sharp vision had begun to blur. But her mind was still a supernova, burning as brightly as ever. She took her new position not with triumph, but with the same humility that had guided her since childhood. There is more to learn. There is always more to learn. As the years passed, she continued publishing groundbreaking research. She wrote popular science books, hoping to bring the cosmos to ordinary people. She traveled, lectured, and mentored. When the space age dawned and rockets first lifted into the sky, she watched with quiet awe, knowing that much of what humanity now understood about stars, and therefore about space itself, came from her once dismissed work. The world did not yet fully grasp the magnitude of her contribution, but the foundation of modern astrophysics rested on the stones she had laid. In her later years, as younger astronomers visited her office for guidance, many were surprised by how approachable she was. They expected a legend. Instead, they found a gentle, warm, humorous mentor who asked as many questions as she answered. She never flaunted her achievements. She never took credit for other successes. She carried her legacy not as a crown, but as a responsibility. Even near the end of her life, she rose each morning to write, to calculate, or simply to look through the telescope at the stars she had spent her life decoding. Cecilia Payne passed away in December 1979, leaving behind a universe forever changed. She never sought fame. She never demanded recognition. But today, every astronomer knows her name. Every modern textbook cites her work. Every student who learns what stars are made of learns her discovery. The silence that once swallowed her brilliance has long since dissolved, replaced by admiration, respect, and awe. She is now honored as the woman who revealed the chemical composition of the stars, who proved that hydrogen is the building block of the cosmos, and who reshaped astronomy with nothing but determination, patience, and intellect. Her legacy is not just scientific, it is human. It is the reminder that truth does not need permission to exist. It is the reassurance that genius can bloom in obscurity, that persistence can outperform privilege, and that, even when ignored, even when doubted, even when dismissed, a single voice can reveal the secrets of the universe. Her journey from a young girl escaping into books to a scientist who unveiled the nature of the stars is the proof that courage is sometimes quiet, that brilliance is sometimes soft-spoken, and that history often takes far too long to listen. And now, as we look up at the night sky, at the stars burning with ancient hydrogen, At galaxies spiraling across the darkness, we see Cecilia Payne's fingerprint etched into every point of light. Her discovery is not just a fact written in textbooks. It is woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Every stargazer, every physicist, every dreamer owes something to her. She gave humanity its first true understanding of the universe. And if her story moved you, if it inspired you, then make sure to subscribe. Because there are countless more forgotten geniuses waiting in the shadows of history. And here on this channel, we bring their stories back to life. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves science, and let's continue exploring the extraordinary minds who changed our world even when the world refused to see them. The stars remember Cecilia Payne, and now, so do we.